The story begins with a plane struggling through a terrifying storm. Our main character, Frank, is returning to Beijing with several employees. At first, everything seems completely normal. But as soon as the plane enters a massive sandstorm, it suddenly starts shaking violently. Everyone inside becomes terrified. Just moments later, a powerful explosion occurs near one of the plane's wings, and a large part of the wing breaks off and crashes into the cockpit. The impact destroys all the electronic systems of the plane. With no control left, the aircraft starts spinning wildly in the air. One of the employees who is standing inside the plane is thrown into the ceiling by a sudden jolt. The others are also tossed around the cabin. Within moments, the plane becomes completely uncontrollable and starts falling toward the ground at a very high speed. When it reaches the ground, it crashes into a huge rock. The impact is so powerful that the back part of the plane breaks away, and one of the employees is thrown out and falls thousands of feet down from the sky. But even after this terrible crash, the plane does not stop. It keeps sliding across the desert sand at a terrifying speed. Several hours later, when everyone finally wakes up, they realize that the plane has finally stopped. But the crash has already taken the lives of 3 of their teammates, while Captain Frank is seriously injured. Outside, the sandstorm is still raging. Because of this, getting out of the plane is almost impossible. To make things even worse, the oxygen inside the aircraft is slowly running out. In desperation, one of the survivors breaks a window without thinking about the consequences. But the moment the window breaks, huge amounts of sand begin rushing inside the plane. That is when everyone realizes something terrifying. Their entire aircraft is buried under the desert sand. After some time, the strong winds begin pushing the sand away. Slowly, the plane becomes visible again. The survivors carefully climb out of the aircraft. Once outside, the first thing they do is check their food and water supplies. Then they discover another frightening truth. They have only enough food and drinking water to survive for about 1 month. Captain Frank checks the map and tells everyone that their plane has crashed in a remote desert area of China. There is no sign of human life anywhere around them. The biggest problem is that they have no radio signal left, so they cannot contact anyone for help. At this point, a bald man steps forward and says that he can walk out of the desert. He explains that he has gone trekking many times before, but then a man named Reddy stops him. Reddy explains that it is July, and July is considered the hottest month of the year in this desert. He warns them that even if someone drinks just 1 glass of water before starting the journey, their body could lose 10 times more water through sweat along the way. After hearing this, even the bald man realizes that crossing this desert alone would be almost impossible. The group then comes together and buries their 3 dead teammates in the desert sand. It is an extremely painful moment for everyone. They now understand that their real fight for survival has only just begun. That night, everyone goes back inside the plane and tries to sleep. They hope that they will find a way out the next day. But around midnight, Davis leaves the plane to use the bathroom. Suddenly, a powerful windstorm starts blowing across the desert. Davis accidentally hits his foot against a rock and loses his balance. He slips down a sand dune and falls directly into a deep pit. Because of the dust storm, he cannot see anything around him. He starts shouting for help as loudly as he can, but the strong winds completely drown out his cries. The next morning, everyone wakes up and realizes that Davis is missing. They immediately become worried and start searching for him in every direction. But even after searching for a long time, they could not find any sign of Davis. The truth was that during the terrible sandstorm the previous night, Davis had been buried alive under the sand. However, his supervisor had no idea what had happened to him. He kept calling Davis's name and was about to go outside to search for him. But suddenly, another powerful sandstorm started moving straight toward them. The others had no choice but to grab him and pull him back inside the plane. After the storm finally passed, Davis's disappearance made everyone in the group extremely worried. Meanwhile, 2 passengers secretly took a few bottles of water and started preparing to leave the desert on their own. But Captain Frank caught them before they could leave. He strictly told them that no one was allowed to take even a single drop of water from the camp. The argument quickly became heated. Soon, the 2 men started fighting with the captain. During the struggle, one of the water bottles hit an iron pipe and broke. All the water inside spilled onto the desert sand and was completely wasted. Seeing this made everyone even more angry. Just then, a man named Elliot stepped forward. Somehow, he managed to calm everyone down. He then told them that he had a possible way to get out of the desert alive. Elliot explained that he had been carefully studying the damaged plane for the past few days. According to him, if everyone worked together, they could use the wreckage of the plane to build a small aircraft. Captain Frank was surprised by his idea and asked how much he actually knew about planes. Elliot confidently explained that he had designed several aircraft before. He believed he could build another working plane from the wreckage in front of them. Hearing this gave everyone a new sense of hope. They all agreed to support Elliot and help him build the aircraft. But Captain Frank was still against the idea. He believed that building a plane in the middle of the desert without the proper equipment was impossible. In his opinion, they would only waste their time and use up their limited food and water. But the next morning, another problem appeared. One of their companions, Liddell, had suddenly disappeared without telling anyone. As soon as Kelly heard the news, she wanted to go out and search for him, but the captain stopped her. Instead, he took a bottle of water and went out alone to look for Liddell. After walking for some time, he reached the place where the rear section of the plane had crashed into the rocks. There, he suddenly noticed the body of the man who had been thrown out of the plane during the crash. The captain walked closer to the body, and what he saw shocked him. The man's clothes were completely gone, and his entire body was covered with bullet wounds. Just then, Liddell appeared at the same location. The captain had come there looking for him. Liddell explained that he had returned to find his watch. It had been a gift from his girlfriend, and he wanted to get it back. But when he looked at the dead man's wrist, he noticed that the watch was missing. At that moment, Liddell realized something terrifying. They were not alone in this empty desert. Someone else was out there, and that person was extremely ruthless. He had fired several bullets into a dead man's body and then stolen his watch before disappearing. Hearing this, the captain immediately told Liddell that they needed to go back. But before leaving, Liddell asked him why he was still against building the new plane. Captain Frank honestly told him that he did not want to give the others false hope. He was convinced that the plane would never be able to fly. Liddell then said something that completely changed the captain's mind. He told him that if they could not give someone happiness, then at least they should not take away their hope of staying alive. Those words touched the captain deeply. Finally, he agreed to build the new plane. When the two men returned to the camp, Captain Frank told Elliot that everyone would now work with him to build the aircraft. Hearing this brought hope back to everyone's faces. From that moment on, the entire group followed Elliot's instructions and started working together. They began using the wreckage of the crashed plane to build a new aircraft. But the extreme heat of the desert made their work even harder. Working outside during the day was almost like risking their lives. So they decided to rest during the day and work throughout the night. Captain Frank took full responsibility for the entire process so that everything could be done properly and on time. They made a fire near the plane and used a small generator to provide light during the night. But one night, while they were welding, some sparks suddenly landed on a fuel drum. A powerful explosion happened, and everyone nearby became terrified. Luckily, no one was injured in the accident, but most of their precious fuel was destroyed. Then Dan told everyone that they now had only enough fuel left to fly the new aircraft one last time. Since most of their fuel was gone, working at night was no longer possible. They had no choice but to work under the burning desert sun. The extreme heat was making them weaker with every passing moment. Still, no one gave up. Everyone continued working as hard as they could to finish the new plane. After several days of hard work, they reached one of the most difficult steps. They had to place the huge wing onto the aircraft frame. There was no room for a mistake. If the wing fell onto the sand, they had no way to lift it back up. Without wasting any time, everyone worked together and slowly lowered the heavy wing with the help of a chain. But suddenly, the chain broke in the middle. The heavy wing dropped out of control and crashed directly into the plane's frame. Everyone thought that all their hard work from the past few days had been destroyed. But then Max came out of the plane and happily shouted that the job was complete. Everyone was shocked to hear this. Elliot took a closer look and realized that the wing was actually in the correct position. It was firmly attached to the plane. Seeing this, everyone became extremely happy. For the first time in many days, they felt that they might actually survive and escape from the desert. They started celebrating with happiness. They danced and sang together. At the same time, they began clearing the sand to build a small runway so the plane could take off easily. But their fight was not over yet. A few days later, the weather in the desert suddenly changed. The sky became covered with dark clouds, and lightning started striking again and again. Their biggest concern was the wing of the plane, which was filled with fuel. If lightning hit it, the entire plane could explode. So everyone immediately started running toward a safe place. But Elliot stayed behind. He did not want to leave the plane that he had spent so many days building. Instead, he climbed directly onto the aircraft and stood there. Suddenly, lightning started moving straight toward him. At the last moment, Captain Frank rushed toward Elliot and saved his life. The captain knew that if Elliot died, finishing the Phoenix would be almost impossible. After the storm finally passed, everyone came together and gave their new plane a name. They called it Phoenix. However, there was still some work left to complete. Meanwhile, their drinking water was running dangerously low. So Kelly went out to search for water, hoping to find something that could save them. But after walking only a short distance, she saw something that completely shocked her. Without wasting a second, she ran back to the group. That night, Captain Frank arrived at the location with two of his teammates and a pair of binoculars. He looked toward the desert and suddenly noticed several tents set up in the distance. Captain Frank and Mark watched them carefully and soon realized that these were not ordinary people. They were dangerous criminals who used the desert routes to smuggle weapons. Captain Frank then said that there was only one way left to get water. They would have to go to these smugglers and ask them for help, but Elliot immediately refused to let the captain do it. He warned that these men were carrying dangerous weapons. If anything happened to Captain Frank, finishing the Phoenix would become impossible. Even after Elliot's warning, some of the men decided to go toward the smugglers because Captain Frank insisted that they needed water. For safety, Captain Frank and one of his teammates stayed hidden behind a large rock some distance away. They were ready to provide cover fire if anything went wrong. Meanwhile, the men from the group moved toward the smugglers and asked them for water. But before they could even explain what they wanted, one of the smugglers suddenly opened fire on them. One of their teammates was killed on the spot. Seeing this, Captain Frank and his companion immediately returned fire. Within a short time, almost all of the smugglers were killed. However, one wounded smuggler managed to escape from the area. Captain Frank could have easily shot him, but he chose not to. He did not want to become a killer. After the fight, Captain Frank started searching the bodies of the dead smugglers. Suddenly, he noticed a watch on one of their wrists. He looked closely and realized that it was the same watch that Liddell's girlfriend had given him. Now, everyone finally understood the truth. The dead man they had found after the plane crash had been shot and robbed by these same smugglers. They were the ones who had stolen his watch. After that, the group found the wounded smuggler and brought him back to their camp. Some members of the group wanted to kill him because his men had already killed one of their friends. But Captain Frank strongly refused to let them do it. This led to a heated argument among the entire team. Suddenly, Elliot pulled out a gun and shot the wounded smuggler. Captain Frank was furious when he saw this. The two men immediately started arguing. Elliot blamed everything on the captain. He said that if Captain Frank had not made the wrong decisions, they would never have been trapped in this desert. He also reminded the captain that he had already warned him not to go to the smugglers. But Captain Frank had ignored him, and because of that decision, another member of their group had been killed. Hearing this, Captain Frank completely lost his temper. He punched Elliot hard in the face. That punch badly hurt Elliot's pride. In anger, Elliot openly told everyone that he would not work on the Phoenix for even one more minute. The entire group became worried because they all knew that without Elliot, the Phoenix could never be completed. To save everyone's lives, Captain Frank finally had to put his pride aside. He went to Elliot and apologized to him. He promised that from that moment on, he would follow Elliot's instructions without questioning him. Hearing the captain's words, Elliot finally calmed down. He agreed to continue working and once again focused on completing the Phoenix. But as soon as they started working again, the smugglers returned to the area. This time, they did not attack. Instead, they decided to wait. They knew that Captain Frank's group now had their weapons, so they believed that once the group's food and water ran out, everyone would become weak. Then attacking them would be much easier. Meanwhile, the growing danger forced the group to work even faster on the Phoenix. Finally, after several days of exhausting work, the Phoenix was completely finished. But then Captain Frank found an old magazine. Inside it were pictures of several small aircraft models. As soon as he looked at them, he was shocked. The design of the Phoenix looked very similar to those models. In that moment, Elliot's biggest secret was finally exposed. The planes he had talked about earlier were not real aircraft. They were actually small flying model planes made for children. Elliot had spent his entire life designing remote-controlled model planes. He had never built a real aircraft that could carry people. When everyone learned the truth, they became furious. One of the men named Ian became so angry that he pointed a gun directly at Elliot's forehead. He shouted that Elliot had been playing with all of their lives for so many days. According to Ian, this aircraft looked like a pile of junk and could never fly. But Elliot was not scared at all. He completely trusted his design. With full confidence, he told everyone that the plane he had built would definitely fly. Just then, Captain Frank stepped in and stopped Ian from shooting Elliot. At that exact moment, another powerful sandstorm started moving through the desert. The wind became so strong that the Phoenix slowly started lifting off the ground by itself. Seeing this, everyone finally believed that Elliot's design might actually work. But within seconds, the storm became even more violent. Before anyone could do anything, the entire Phoenix was buried under the sand. When the weather finally became calm, everyone looked at their buried aircraft. Their happiness quickly turned into disappointment. The Phoenix was completely covered by sand, and it seemed like all their hard work had been destroyed. They started thinking that they might never be able to pull the aircraft out again, but then Captain Frank stepped forward. He reminded everyone that they had built the Phoenix with their blood, sweat, and hard work. He said they would leave the desert only after making the Phoenix fly. He also reminded them that their families were waiting for them, and that they could not allow the sacrifice of their dead teammates to become meaningless. The captain's words gave the entire team new strength. Everyone immediately started working together. Within just a few minutes, they managed to pull the Phoenix out of the sand. Then they pushed it toward the runway. Once everything was ready, Captain Frank went to start the Phoenix's engine for the first time. Everyone waited anxiously for the engine to come alive. But suddenly, a small explosion came from inside the engine. The loud sound even reached the smugglers who were waiting in the distance. A moment later, the Phoenix's engine stopped again. Everyone became silent, but Captain Frank refused to give up. He tried starting the engine again. The engine would run for a few seconds and then stop every time. Elliot and the others slowly started losing hope. They felt that their final chance of escaping the desert was gone, but Captain Captain Frank made one last attempt. This time, the Phoenix's engine started with a powerful roar. Everyone immediately became excited. The sound of the engine also reached the smugglers in the distance. They quickly got on their horses, grabbed their guns, and started riding toward the Phoenix. Meanwhile, everyone in the group quickly climbed onto the aircraft and held tightly onto its wings. Elliot had designed the Phoenix in a very unusual way. There was no space inside for people to sit. He had used parts from the damaged aircraft to create a very light flying structure. The goal was to make it light enough to escape the desert using very little fuel. The Phoenix began racing down the runway at full speed. Behind them, the smugglers started firing their guns. During the attack, one of the Phoenix's wings suddenly developed a problem. Elliot immediately moved toward the back of the aircraft. He risked his life and started fixing the problem while the plane was moving. But then the runway suddenly came to an end. The Phoenix was heading straight toward a deep valley. They had no way to stop because the smugglers were still chasing them from behind. A moment later, the Phoenix went straight into the valley. The smugglers stopped and watched from behind. They were completely sure that the Phoenix had been destroyed. But then something incredible happened. The new aircraft had been designed so well that it managed to lift into the air and start flying. The smugglers were completely shocked. They could not believe that such a damaged-looking aircraft was actually flying. Meanwhile, everyone riding on the Phoenix was filled with happiness. After weeks of exhausting work, their efforts had finally paid off. They had achieved something that seemed impossible. They had escaped the desert and defeated death. And with that, this incredible story finally comes to an end. If you enjoyed this movie recap, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel to watch more such amazing movie recaps. Thanks for watching.